Do you remember in the movie Gran Torino, Clint Eastwood? There's a point in which he's sitting on the porch drinking beer, looking all grumpy at all the young kids and so on. Well, I talk about that because last time you saw my daughter, she had just learned to walk, and you were
Mhm.
helping her avoid running into the corners of tables in the restaurant. Right
Yeah.
now, she's writing her thesis about artificial intelligence. And in a few months, she's going to be working in one of the big five consulting companies. So, my question to you is, Mark, um, how old do you feel, and how close are you getting to that point, being like Clint sitting there on your porch, like, freaking young people are ruining everything?
Well, uh, I how I am definitely older, slower, and like we were talking, my hips are acting up. Um, so I am turning into a grumpy old man. Um, and you know, part of how grumpy I am about the way things going really isn't towards the kids per se, but how they've been manipulated
Yeah.
and how they aren't being taught to think for themselves, but they're being programmed to be little drones. So it's funny because I can't exactly say, these young whippersnappers don't, because it's sort of like they've been turned into little robots.
Yeah.
And I don't like what they've been turned into. Right, and that is on almost like a level of religious fanaticism, and, like, here in the States, we have kids who are absolutely convinced that, you know, older people are stupid, they're oppressors, they're evil, and, it's kind of scary for me to see the mindset of these younger kids because I know where this kind of thinking leads, and it's not a good place.
Yeah. And then the reason why I kind of make this joking introduction is because the reason for this podcast is I posted something on my Facebook page a little while ago about me being a political orphan. And
Yeah.
I'll put a link in the show notes for everybody. And if you don't know what the show notes are, it's wimsblog.com/, and then the number of this episode. And then you'll find all the show notes. Um, Basically, it was every single party I voted for abandoned me. I didn't abandon them; they left me.
Yes.
I didn't really change all that much. Overall, my position and principles are the same. Some stuff changed, but most of it is the same. But they went left field or right field, and I'm like, okay, I can't follow you there.
It's
Uh,
on the insanity horizon.
oh
It
yeah,
does. And it's like, damn. Yeah.
and we talked about that, and basically my point that I made in that post is that everything's become political. Like every freaking single thing is political,
Yeah.
which means that if everything is political, then everything will be contentious.
Yes.
Which means that there is no place where you can be an American, a Belgian, a this and that, because you have to be divided into those factions at the
Mhm.
very minimum for you guys, because you got a two-party political system. Basically, we've got a bunch more. Is like, which party are you voting for? Which is pretty much the first thing that people try to figure out. Once they know, they just go, okay, everything you say, I'm going to oppose it.
Mhm.
It used to be different. Like we could come together over, I don't know, Belgium, that would be the national soccer team. Still is to a degree, but in the US, it could be, basketball, football, whatever you want. But that's become political now too. So you can't even come together with somebody from a different political opinion and have common ground. And if
Yeah.
there's no common ground, there's no society. And what is left then? Conflict. It's perpetual conflict, which, like you said, we know where that goes. That eventually breaks. And my point that I wanted to point out before, for the people who've been listening for a while, we get into it, is that I think what needs to happen more is just discussions with people that you disagree with. Or if you disagree on a topic, just talk about it publicly instead of all that cancel culture and all that shaming and all that outrage. Just talk about it. And there was this guy on a podcast who said, look, we need to be able to talk to somebody we disagree with everything, but we need to be able to say to that person, we agree about this thing. Here, we agree. We can have that common ground, and that is a basis. And you and I talked about that a little bit. Basically, my idea is that it's a broken bridge, is the analogy that I use, and you have to reach out to the person on the other side. You don't have to be an idiot about it, because if he pulls you over that divide and you fall into the abyss, you're gone. So you're cautious, but you need to reach out your hand. Now, if he's an asshole about it, okay, you withdraw that hand and we're done. And you don't have to be naive. You don't have to be gullible. You don't have to extend everybody that courtesy if they start by proving that they're going to use it against you. You don't have to be, I grew up Roman Catholic, but I don't necessarily go turn the other cheek all the time. And if I see somebody going to hit me, I'm not even going to present the one side. And you mentioned that, look, I tried that and it doesn't work. Long story short, I changed my policy on my social media and on my blog about not talking politics, but I will read it once for everybody who's listening, and that is available on online as well. So what are the rules for politics for me? Discuss people and policies, not parties. And I got this idea from this series that I like to watch, Madam Secretary, with Thierry Money and Tim Daly. Really fun. I enjoyed it. It's not realism, obviously, but it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. And one of the things I read in an interview with them is that they said they were really proud that they pretty much managed to avoid making a show about Washington, D.C. and politics and not mention political parties. And I thought about it, I said, that's right. I think maybe once or twice they mentioned it, but it was never really a thing. And I think that's the key. And another key is that you have to if you can't call out people on your own side for their bullshit, don't call out the other side. You have to call out the crazies, the extremists, because otherwise they either take over or people don't trust you because you're one of them, maybe.
Well, that and a lot of other things of, okay, when we have enough experience, being older, where you see a side where one part of that group is talking very, very calmly and political and all this, and yet they're using the extremist as their muscle.
Yeah.
Right. So when you say that they don't trust you, it's like, yeah, you're talking out of the side of your neck because your goons are acting out doing this. So it goes beyond just not trusting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I know you're a history buff, and I wouldn't say I'm a buff, but it's an area of interest of mine for a variety of reasons. And the biggest issue I see is that the point that Lynn Alden made a while ago about the economy is that some economical cycles are longer than a human lifespan.
Yes.
So we don't see those necessarily unless you are well trained, educated, and so on in a certain field. But how can you? Because it's longer than your life. And I've been making this point for years now and telling people that, look, where I live, this is the anomaly. 70 plus years of a major war breaking out. It's been over 2,000 years since that happened. So, minimum of 2 millennia of constantly having war with slowdowns for maybe a few years, maybe a few decades, but never 70 years. Never. Didn't happen. And for those with short memory spans, when the Romans came to my neck of the woods, they slaughtered about 1 million Gaul.
Oh, yeah.
The Gaul is a people who used to live here, for those who don't know that part. So my point is that this is unheard of in European history, to put it mildly. And I'm willing to venture that in other continents it's pretty similar.
I'd say world history.
Yeah.
And yes, we have been in a blessed period, and I don't mean that in a religious sense, but it's like just looking at it, and it is amazing what we have had. And part of it is we're now breaking. Humans are social primates, but more than that, we're also tribal.
Yeah.
And what we're getting into now is we're falling back into these tribes or clans, or whatever you want to call them, where it's us against the world. And something you mentioned earlier that pinged in my head. There's a term. It's an older term, and it's treat with. Okay. And it's something that a lot of people have forgotten because they automatically go, oh, well, you treat people with respect. It's like, no. Did we go dark?
All right. Can you hear me now?
I got you now. Did I fall out?
No, I felt out. Okay. Yep. Okay, we're back. Sorry, guys. I didn't hear what you said there for a minute.
Um, I like to point people to a term called treat with.
Yeah.
Okay. And in modern world, people will go, oh, well, treat with respect, treat with. It's like, no, no, no. Treat with is an old term when you had two armed groups, right? And two sets of people who could do serious damage to each other. What were the rules with interacting with each other? And how do you come to terms, agreements and negotiate? And treating with other groups, especially when they are capable of causing damage, it really is a matter of self-control and agreement where everybody knows that nobody wants the shooting to start, right? And that you don't do certain things. And that's a term that I think when you're talking about these long cycles and people, being unaware that we are in an unprecedented period of peace, they've lost that. So they don't know how not to antagonize somebody. They think it's okay. Oh, I hate these people, so I can say whatever I want to their face and safely do it. It's like, no. And I think we're getting close to the point where things are going to erupt in violence again. And I'm not sure it's going to be between nations so much as it is among identity groups.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I mentioned that in the post that I wrote before, is that, I mean, you and I have talked about this privately as well, and a bunch of other people too, is the increase in basically ideological and political violence that we've seen in the US, but in other countries as well. That this has been growing steadily, and the reaction by, for instance, mainstream media and politicians on that has been scary.
Yes.
And that that kind of stuff eventually does lead into problematic situations, because the society needs to be held together and needs to be able to function. And if you start chipping away at certain things that need to be present for that society to function, eventually something will break.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big issues that I see is that I really like the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. Magic wizards, personal investigator, PI wizard, and so on. But there's a really interesting thing. There's I have to switch off my phone. Forgot that we were chatting so well before I started recording, and I forgot that. Is that there's the Council of the Wizards that
Yes.
have a bunch of rules, like this is how you use magic, and they are extremely strict, penalty of death, and so on.
Yes.
But then it turns out that there's this one guy who's allowed to break the rules. One of the wizards who's on the High Council. He can break the rules, and one of those rules is that you shall not kill with magic, and he can do that.
Yeah.
Now, the really interesting part I see is that wizards don't know about it, except for some, because otherwise you can't keep them in line.
Right.
But they
Right.
do recognize, and I think that's the genius of how Butcher writes, to say he does recognize that there's in the real world, there are times when you have to break the rules, when that is the only solution, knowing full well that is not a good thing.
Yes.
So you have to be choosing in when and where you apply that measure. But at the same time, that character in the book series also pays a price for it.
Yes.
And I think that is something that what I see nowadays more and more, especially these last few years, is people who know this, instead of shutting the hell up about it, being public about it, that they're breaking the rules, and what are you going to do about it? Not understanding, because I think they don't see the cycles that are longer than the human lifespan. They don't know that, they don't believe that the history of humanity will repeat itself, that there's no arc of history trending up. It can go down.
Yeah.
It can get worse. And they're just in your face, blatantly showing like, so what? We broke the rules.
Yes.
What
And
are you going to do?
I can point one of the things for your audience. You and I both know certain people who did that thing over in that place with those guys.
Yep.
Okay. And they were involved in the great game, and there was a lot of dirty pool with what was going on. And everybody, I mean, that was how the game was played, but the main people didn't see it. And when the Bush administration made torture legal,
An enhanced interrogation, Mark.
enhanced interrogation, those people that we knew all categorically hit the roof, right? And it was like, that's not how you do it. It's it's done behind closed doors. Everybody knows it happens, but it's not admitted. You don't flop it on the table, right? And it was just like, you don't open those doors. And that was an example of, you know, that it, oh yeah. And I mean, and when you realize that the idea was sold to that administration, right? And it was such a violation of the delicate balance that had always gone on. And that's one. Now, with, other administrations, they are doing stuff that is blatantly just, no, that's not how it's done. And they're like, what are you going to do about it? And it's like, I don't think you understand. It's not what this group is going to do about what you're doing, it's the
Yeah.
consequences of when people decide to do it. Hey, if you can do it, we can do it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
and that's the big thing. I mean, why are there treaties about how we should treat prisoners of war? Why is there military law and so on? For many reasons, and that's one of them. We don't want the free for all. You do
Mhm.
want rules of engagement. And yes, we know that not everybody follows those, and we know who those assholes are. Um, guess what? Whoever we is in that case, pick your country, also do that,
Yeah.
but we hide it.
Right.
And that's the point. And what I wanted to say is that, and I'll give two examples of just the way that this manifests in varying fields. So there was a case here a few years ago, Jonathan Jacobs, a guy who was a drug addict. I think he was schizophrenic also, bodybuilder, big, strong guy. He has
Mhm.
an episode high as a kite, and he becomes violent in the middle of the street. They bring him in. They bring him to the psychiatric hospital. Those people refuse to take him in, which is against the law. But they're like, we can't do that. He's too dangerous, right? So a lot of police do. They put him in a cell in the jail. And if I'm not mistaken, because it's been a while since I followed that closely, but the doctor who is on call to see what's going on with that guy says that okay, you have to give him this tranquilizer shot and so on. Right. So they bring this special brigade, kind of like a SWAT team, in that they're going to go in with like 5, 6 guys. with a big,
Mhm.
like a tiger fork pole, pushing the guy back, try to
Mhm.
draw a pile on top of him, and this and that. Long story short, that guy fights really hard, pretty much burns up, and he dies.
Mhm.
The cops get sued. And
Yes.
end result, they are found guilty. And what the judge who ruled that said was several things like, okay, why didn't they put a dog against that guy, or why didn't they throw in tear gas or something like that into the cell? I'm like, excuse me, this is against international law. You know, it's called chemical warfare. You're not allowed to do that. Police isn't allowed to do that. And those two solutions, quote unquote, that he offered is like, dear Your Honor, is what you guys say, Mr. Judge. You have no idea what you're talking about when it comes to violence. You have
Yes.
no idea what you're talking
Yeah.
about when it comes to law enforcement. You are judging and ruling on something that you fundamentally do not understand.
Let me take that a step further. That it's not only do they not fundamentally understand it, but because of TV, Hollywood, and all these other things, what they think they know is wrong. So it's not just you don't understand it, it's what you think you know
Yeah,
is wrong. Like, and you think that's okay. And that is a huge problem that, people don't understand not only what the long-term consequences, but why that solution wouldn't have worked and probably would have gone way worse for something else. And I mean, something that I have a personal bone about well, it was summed up with a personal experience when I told this boss who was like, I don't understand why, we need all these expensive things. And I said, because I don't want to die protecting your interest. And he goes, that's your job. Right. And the idea of sacrificing other people's lives, especially like the police, the people in the hospital, right? Sacrificing their lives and injuries to protect this one guy who is totally out of control. That's a mindset that is just, wait, people are not expendable. And if you got somebody who is so far out of the bounds, how many people are we willing to sacrifice to protect that person?
yeah.
You know,
It's a
and
mindset. It's a mindset that again, people don't understand violence and what, like you said, what they think comes from movies, TV, and so on.
mhm,
And just not seeing the overall picture, because society has become safer for decades on end. And yes, you know, I read the Uniform Crime Report every year, so I'm well aware of the trends in violence and this and that for decades on end now. But the point is that for the average person, the average citizen in the Western country, it's been pretty damn safe for a long, long time, for generations, basically.
right. And that they've forgotten
Yeah.
what dangers happen, and yet at the same time, and I mean, I've mostly shifted over to the legal aspect of this, like dealing with the aftermath of it, and the idea that these people have about what violence is and what they don't know of, like, no, that's a dangerous situation. And one of the most terrifying events I ever had was I was talking to a lawyer and he was like, why is this guy just not taking a plea deal? I don't know why this case isn't going away. And I said, because it actually was self-defense. And you're asking him to admit to something, confess to a crime he didn't do because it really was self-defense. And when I said that, the attorney looked at me and went, really? And I'm like, yeah, if he hadn't done something, he would have died. Right. Um, but then, the mindset, and again, it's part of what I'm I'm really having trouble with is how many people who are disconnected from violence and the realities of it honestly believe that the first responders are you can sacrifice them.
Yeah.
Okay, that oh well, it's okay if they die, but don't let this guy die, right? And that's a very dangerous mindset, because a lot of a lot of police, a lot of firemen, etc., with everything is going on and that, the heat they're taking, the good ones are quitting.
Yep.
And
Yeah. We saw that with the George Floyd, protests slash riots. I mean, and I followed that closely because to me that was um, there's a bunch of stuff I want to say about this. The main thing is that it. I think it has been since the LA riots, the Rodney King riots, that there was this massive rioting for such a long time, basically about 3 months on end. Whereas the LA riots was what, like a week, I think,
yeah.
give or take. And then the National Guard came in, and now there's like, no, 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 we're gonna let this go. And I think for many, many Americans, and what people forget is that it wasn't just in the big cities. There are very friendly Boy Scout group, always dressed in black, who went to smaller towns as well. And in some places they got run out of town, but in other places they wreaked havoc. But the point is that this was just happening, and people was like, no, 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 this is important. We need to protest. And um, the thing that then happened, and I think it was in August, if I don't misremember, the city of Minneapolis said like, okay, we're going to defund the police because it happened in Minneapolis. That was first suggested, and if I'm not mistaken, the city council voted on that. They said yes, and they're like, that's it, we're defunding the police. No plan, no preparation, no, well, what are we going to do instead? How will we allocate the funds that we save to actually create the utopian, safer society that they were thinking of? And like less than a year later, they're like, okay, we need to hire more police officers. Because they all left. You said to those guys, there's no job for you here. There's no more money for you here. We don't want you here. You're doing a bad job. Go. Now, when I say that, people get very upset because like, yeah, you're always defending the police. I'm like, no. All the bad shoots that happen, the bad uses of force and up into including lethal force, put those cops in jail if they're crooked cops, if they're assholes who need to be punished. Punish them as harshly as the law allows, because they are supposed to be the guys who strap on that shield and that this says that I'm here to protect you, and they need to stick to that. And if they act like violent thugs, and then they deserve all the punishment that they can get. That's my opinion. However, the vast majority of the cases that I've seen these last few years, people who cry for that kind of punishment, they have no idea about what violence is like. Like we said, they don't know how police officers work. They don't know what the law is. I know my rights, yes, but you also know your obligations. You do have some, as a US citizen. One of them is obey the law. Let's start with that one. And the end result is that we get this whole mix of everything coming together, and the violence just keeps happening and it keeps going. Now, what do a lot of people do? A, they get out of the cities. B, first responders say like, we're out. San Francisco now just basically it came out. I think they're like 500 cops short or more. I forget. And all that is happening. And what people don't understand is that it isn't necessarily this instant crime wave that happens, but there's this creep that sets in and slowly takes over, and neighborhoods slowly deteriorate, turn to crap, and so on. San Francisco office space, the shitload is empty, and businesses are going away. People move out because they don't work there anymore. A lot of businesses close, smaller mom and pop shops, supermarkets, and so on. And before you know it, you're going to have Detroit. But by all means, when I said that 3 years ago, people said you're exaggerating. I'm like, okay, your turn.
Small businesses,
Including.
Walmart is closing 269 stores.
Yeah.
Okay. Walmart. They're just saying, hey, we can't stay here and keep working. Now, when you talk about let's back this up a bit. You mentioned George Floyd. Now, I really have problems with. I wouldn't have had trouble with Chauvin getting a manslaughter charge. Okay. Yeah, okay. That, people need it, but calling it murder. Um, there are a lot of things that people don't know about that particular case.
Yeah.
Okay. Number one, um, when you're talking about counterfeit money, okay, odds are you've passed counterfeit money.
Yeah.
Okay. The thing is, the way it's done is you get these people who do the printing, they go to a larger crew, an organization who buy that counterfeit money at, really reduced. They go out and they buy stuff, but they basically distribute it to their own people. Okay, so let's say there's like a large gang that, buys $1 million worth of, funny money. Well, all of their guys are passing it out. When Floyd he tried to pass a fake 20. However, he was in possession of, I believe, 4 more bills. So now we're talking a counterfeit ring.
Yeah, the odds of you having more than one counterfeit bill on you as an average citizen. No.
Number two, he was higher in a kite driving a vehicle. Right. He was in the thing, he drove there, DUIs and, all the problems with that. But when he started resisting, and he did resist, okay, it would have been fine, except there was enough cops there to handle him without any problems, except for the fact that he was ODing. But then a crowd gathered.
Yeah.
And the crowd became hostile, and all the other cops were dealing with him, and they had to keep him down. So it really was a matter of officer safety, right? That the mob was about to free George Floyd, except for he died.
Yeah.
So, and these are the things of like, wait a minute, you're being hostile to the cops doing their jobs about this guy who is involved in a counterfeiting ring and is hiring a guy, could run people over in his car, and is ODing, and nobody's talking about that.
If I'm not mistaken, he was sitting in the driver's seat of his car when the cops rolled in, which I think was a felony also. Don't remember the specifics of the local law, but that he was high, sitting in. If he had been sitting in the back, for instance, it would have been different. Something on those lines.
Cops showed up, that's when he ate all the fentanyl that he had.
Now, before we go on, a quick note to the listener who's getting really, really outraged right now because two cisgender white males are saying all this stuff about a black guy. The DA did not charge Chauvin and the other cops with anything related to racism. He did not. Why? Because it had nothing to do with race.
No, it had to do.
If he could have stuck a racism charge in there, he would have.
Yeah, would have.
Because there's no reason why he wouldn't have. So before you get all angry at us, I mean, think that through. Why would he not claim racism when that is something that everybody was saying about it? He did not.
Earning it because they claimed it was racist.
Yeah.
Right. But again, what you're talking about here is you're getting people who have been programmed, who have been brainwashed, let's call it, to believe this stuff. And they get angry and they get furious about it. And there is no other perspective.
No.
Right. Now, was it a bad use of force? Yeah. Like I said, I really wouldn't have had problems with, going after a manslaughter charge.
No.
Okay. But most people don't know the difference between manslaughter and murder. Right.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, in Minneapolis, it will also you have to show depraved mind. You have to show depravity that it gets complex. Local jurisdiction and local state laws and everything, it changes things. There's a reason why lawyers do this kind of stuff because it's complicated.
It is. So, the thing about it is, that's where like, God, was it, Michael Brown
Yeah,
was off another one where, the beginning of Black Lives Matter, where
hands
hands
up,
up,
don't shoot. Yeah,
right. Well, let's see, he just committed a strong arm robbery, right? The cop told him wasn't the cop was responding to the robbery call, didn't know it was him. Said, "Hey, get out of the street." Brown busted his face. Okay. The cop gets out of the car and Brown charges him this way. And that is what was interpreted as hands up, don't shoot. Except
yeah,
the bullets went down into his torso. So unless the cop walked up, held the gun, he was on his knees, and the cop walked up and shot him down. The only way he could have gotten shot was during the charge, right?
yeah.
But
And that's the thing. Go ahead, go ahead.
one person said he was trying to surrender, and all the other witnesses said no, he was charging,
Yeah,
right? But see, if you only have one point of view, okay, if you've been conditioned to think that way, you're going to buy the narrative. See, so, when you talk about different groups having this discussion, is you really actually do need to listen to the other side.
yeah,
Okay, and find out what the other side is saying. Now, I mean, honestly, I'll be the first one to admit that the way blacks have been treated in the past in this country was terrible.
yeah,
Okay. We've had 50 years of, you know, civil rights and, the Civil Rights Act and all these things that swept away all those old laws and practices. And now it's, you're looking at it and it's like, is it racism or is it because of behaviors? Okay. And that's the thing. We can't talk about it because anytime you try and talk about the behaviors, people get upset and claim that it's racism,
yeah,
okay, or oppression or whatever. All these, these things where we are not being allowed to look at what is actually going on. And I picked up a term from a friend, one of those over there with those guys doing that thing. Um, and he talks about ground truth. And that is, here you have all these reports, you have all these studies, you have all these things that are being fed to the people who are making policies, right? And then you have the ground truth, which is what's actually going on. Okay. We cannot talk about the ground truth.
yeah,
Oh, and people are getting wound up because of what they're being told rather than looking at what's actually happening. Because once you look at what's actually happening, you realize it's a wicked problem with all sorts of factors involved.
yeah.
But no, 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 it's this. No, it's not. Right. And yet, when you get people who are in their tribes, each tribes have their own narrative, but they also have we were talking about history. Do you know the difference between history and heritage?
No, go.
History is the study of what happened. Okay, you look at it from all aspects, you try and figure out this is what happened, how did this occur? Okay. Heritage is the stories a group of people tell themselves about themselves and what happened. Now, for example, here in the United States, for years, we had the heritage story of George Washington chopping down a cherry tree. And when asked, he says, I cannot tell a lie. That's heritage. Okay. Complete BS. Okay. What's a Belgian version of it?
Oh, that we are the bravest of all the Gaul because Julius Caesar said it.
Oh.
Well, I actually had to translate some of the Bello Gallico of the Gaul Wars that he wrote,
Mhm.
and he basically said that we were the hillbilly thugs from the provinces
Uh-huh.
because we were uncultured and this and that, but boy could we fight. Now, the Belgai that he was talking about, those are not us people living in Belgium right now. It's not the same people. Second thing is that you have to understand what's going on. I mean, he was doing very, very expensive warfare, and it was not like Rome was a stable place. It was also not like the Roman leadership liked him all that much because they kind of had a history of guys like him, generals, becoming popular and taking over. So they didn't want that. So he had to justify a lot of shit he did.
Mm-hmm.
And when you translate De Bello Gallico, what you'll see is that it's like a propaganda action report, after action report, or analysis, if you want. Is that he's like, look, we're doing this fight, this battle here, and that's what happened over there. And those guys, man, they were really tough, but we got them in the end. But they're really, really tough. So I think I might need some more troops, and I might need some more money to keep this shit going. Because those Belgians, I mean, man, you don't want to fight those guys. They're crazy. I mean, they're
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
And if you look at it in that context, it changes things a little bit. And quickly before we move on that one, um, people often claim that Caesar said "divide et impera," divide and conquer. It's not
Mhm.
what that means. Impera means rule, to rule, divide and rule, which is what he did. He would set the tribes up against each other so that they would fight each other, and he'd have an easier time with the one who was left. He would fight others and so on.
So anyway,
No, because they hate each other's guts.
all the time, So yeah.
And that brings me to what we're talking about with the polarization, the tribalism. This is exactly what whoever is in power, wherever it is, wants is different factions going at each other because then they don't go after the establishment. Throughout history, you will see this is always true. The main thing what we see nowadays, the polarization is so extreme that it tends to get out of hand, and then you get 3 months of rioting and so on, or the as we call them useful idiots. That is a technical term, folks. Look it up. The useful idiots come out of control,
Yes.
and with the advent of social media, technology, and so on, they are much, much, much better organized and can do a lot more damage than they used to.
And at the same time, the losing control of them
Hmm.
is we want to manipulate these people to do this, but then once they start doing it on their own, it really gets ugly. And we're getting closer and closer to that here in the United States. That you can't control these people anymore. And it's like if you're goading them on thinking you're going to control them, like no, you're not getting that. And the idea of divide and conquer, or all this stuff, is when you have these different groups working against each other. I mean, when somebody finally does win and take control, they are the nastiest of the bunch. Right? But the time in between when all these guys are fighting each other, that's more common and last longer than the nastier guy, taking control.
Yeah.
So, I'm telling people to be aware because there are people out there who hate you because somebody else told them to hate you,
Yeah.
and they'll act out, right? So you're in danger really because this person decides to act out to what they've been told.
Yeah. The the point that I mean, I just said it, but I think it's important to expand on that a little bit. Is that when I talk about the establishment, what I mean in this case is whoever is ruling the country or the city or the place wherever you are. Now, let's say that's a government, that just to make it easy for everybody. All right, look at the US government. You guys have Republicans and Democrats. And before we go on, when I talk about politicians, I almost universally loathe them all. So, like I said, there's a reason why I'm a political orphan, because I think they all suck. And if you guys in the US think you have bad politicians, come to Belgium. It's worse. So the point I want to make is that when you look at the track records, I mean, despite all the polarization you guys have in the political system right now, look at how they all vote on let's say about 90-95% of the issues. They all vote the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the establishment, is that the machine keeps going, it keeps running, and those politicians who are screaming at each other actually vote the same way on especially the stuff that is important to them,
Mm-hmm.
but also just that keeps the system going. Now, you don't have to like it, but that is pretty much the reality, and it pretty much always has been throughout history, that there's this faction or a bunch of people or a noble family, a king or whatever, who's in charge. You're not it. Like George Carlin said, it's a small club and you're not in it. You're not an elite. You are not.
Actually, I'm going to take that into a slightly different direction. And here in the United States, we theoretically have three branches of government. Okay. Notice the word theoretically. What we're running into is the overdevelopment of bureaucracy, and that's becoming the fourth branch of government.
Yeah.
And it's less about the politicians and the way things are working are because of bureaucracy. And that's kind of it's it's originally it was like, okay, government overreach, but it's rapidly becoming bureaucratic entitlement. And that is something that has got nothing to do with the politicians. Um, I mean, the politicians may put their stamp of approval on it, right? But they're really not the ones making the decisions. And that's where you're seeing it on so many different levels. And a lot of it has to do with making money, right? But also a lot of it has to do with, control. And I mean, like the small town I live in has become very, very everything costs, right? And, you know, the argument is, oh, it's for the good of the community. But like the dog licensing, is you have to have mandatory shots, et cetera. And it just you look at it and you follow the money trails and it's really convoluted, right? And it's like, sure, the city council may have voted for this, but they're not the ones running it. So, that's another one of those issues. And yet it's funny because certain people are like, yeah, we need to give the government more power. Right. And on the other hand, there are people, it's like, no, it's too much. And a lot of people are going rogue, right? And at the same time, like with the police, the legal system, and the prison system, they are horribly understaffed and they actually cannot provide the quality services that they used to. So that's crumbling too. And that's where, but it's like, yes, but when our group is in charge, everything will run better. It's like, no, no.
I,
I think,
one of the people that I've been following for a while is Balaji Srinivasan, who's a incredibly intelligent guy. Very controversial right now because he's predicting the end of the banking system. And he has this quote that I really like, and he says, "We now have people in charge who inherited a system that they could not build themselves."
yep.
And a good example of that is one of my students is German and very smart guy and very active in consulting and other things at an extremely high level. And he told me about a canal in Germany, I think from the North Sea to, I forget which sea, but really, really long. And it was built in maybe the 50s or the 60s in, I think, 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to basically, upgrade it now and fix a lot of problems and this and that. It's going to take 35 years. Now, if it was built in, like half a century ago, why can't they do that faster than 35 years today with all the technology that we have? Bunch of reasons, but the main point is that there is no freaking way that you can sell that to the public. Like 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
There's a viaduct in the Brussels ring in over a town called Vilvoorde. It's basically just a bridge that crosses over the stream. Basically, that's it. It was built in the 50s or in the 60s, I don't remember, and it is now basically used up. It's got concrete rot and all that kind of stuff, asbestos, I think also. They're going to start working on it now. It's going to take 8 years to finish all that work. Now, that is like a traffic jam, heart attack every single day that we're going to have, because it is the busiest spot in Belgium.
Uh-huh.
There's no way they can do it faster. Why? Because they don't know how to build systems anymore. And like you said, we've got all this expansion of rules and bureaucracy and so on. What does an organization do once it achieves its goal? It finds another goal, even if that goal is not necessarily immediate in its purview. They will go for it anyway. Why? Because hardly any organization will dissolve itself once it achieves its goals. Same
Yes.
thing is true for bureaucracy, is that you're responsible for XYZ, fine. Well, what do you need? Well, we need more money, we need more people. So they
Mm-hmm.
keep hiring more people and they have to give them a job to do something. And then you end up with a lot of just basically nonsense jobs and nonsense administrative functions that are there that don't do anything. But they do have to generate reports and commissions have to have meetings and so on. And all of a sudden, what took maybe a day now takes 5 weeks.
Yes.
And then you get to 8 years of doing something that is undoubtedly possible to do a lot faster. And I'll just quickly finish that thought before I'll hand it over to you. Everything's broken. It's everything on every level in modern societies in the West is broken, and people are seeing it and feeling it now.
Yes.
And that on top of all the tribalism, that on top of all the postmodernist bullshit that has basically wrecked a lot of society as well, because we haven't even touched upon that. That is like this perfect storm is being created, along with a banking crisis that is looming on the horizon, or as some say, has already started. Along with all the technical advances that we have in social media, for instance, the way that people can connect and spread information, misinformation, and so on. And now, what I've been telling my patrons for years, robotization and artificial intelligence.
Yep.
I said years ago, like, guys, this is going to change your life. and
Yeah.
it's going to happen really fast. There's a graph that you can see with all the patents that are being requested for artificial intelligence stuff.
Hmm.
Right now, it's vertical.
Yes.
The stat is going vertical, and we're only at the beginning of exponential growth of those things. So people, hold on to your horses because it's going to be a wild ride. Okay,
Yes.
back to you. And for the record, I'm going to start drinking. I have it's 10 p.m. my time. I have this wonderful 10-year-old Glengoyne. So
Well, I will join you because
okay, excellent.
I have a choice between, well, between Talisker and Glenlivet. Ooh, choices.
Ooh, ooh, ooh. You could do both. We say choosing is losing.
Um, yeah, I've heard. Uh, I mean, yes, the banking crisis that you're talking about. Um, I've heard that they're estimating. I think in 20 years, technology is going to replace 40% of the jobs. And I'm gonna drip, 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 drip. Always put a drop of water to open it up.
I don't always do it. Depends. I got this really wonderful ball from one of my students, but it's almost 61 degrees. So it's really strong. It's his cousin, I think, or his brother. I forget who makes it himself. And I did that, for my birthday this weekend, and it needed more than a drop. It needed almost
Yeah.
spoonfuls of water just to be able to drink it. But it was good. It was good. So anyway, cheers.
Cheers. Good seeing you.
Same here.
Well, the thing is, when you say that the system is broken, and that is true, and a lot of it is, like why is it going to take 8 years to build that? Mostly because of um, restrictions, laws, codes, all these,
Regulation. Yeah.
yeah, that they've piled on, and it's like it's not only did they not invent a system, but they inherited years and years of layering stuff where somebody, you know, added something. Just this one little thing, it won't hurt, but the motivations for that, but it gets so complicated that can you fix it? Now the problem is a lot of the younger people have been told, okay, the answer to this problem is to replace this existing system with another one in mass. And they have no idea how destructive that's going to be,
Yeah.
right? And I mean, the infrastructure that we have, the supply chain issues that are now international and are beginning to break down. Okay, trying to get stuff. There are times getting stuff is not as easy as it used to be. Okay, but the idea of like replacing it with this new social order, um I'm really kind of curious how these people are going to handle problems like supply chains, sewage, electricity. They have all these ideas, and it's like you're not really aware of how these things work,
Yeah.
and it's problems are happening, but the idea of replacing it with this new social order, okay, especially when you look at historically what those social orders resulted in. Um, like, yeah, communism killed 100 million people, most of them through starvation and bad policies rather than bullets. Right. So the idea of like, oh, we're going to do this and make a better world. And it's like, do you people know how to keep these things running?
They don't. They don't, and they don't know history anymore. They don't. I mean, I sat across an American professor, university professor, who told me that she knew because she was a professor that the whole thing about communism killing, making many casualties in Europe was very much overrated and exaggerated. And she knew because she was a professor. Out of respect for my host, I didn't say anything, but my first response was, me as an actual European who gets European history in school disagrees with you, and for instance, at least 1 million Ukrainians disagree with you as well. Well, they would if they were alive, but they're dead because they starved.
Yeah.
And that is just one of many, many examples across the globe. But by all means, defend that.
Yeah.
I mean, no matter the weirdest thing for me is that this total lack of knowledge of history and the double standard is like nobody would ever defend anything that our German friends did in the 30s and 40s. This is also going on YouTube, so I'm being a little bit careful in saying some terms. Is that, I mean, obviously that is horrible. That doesn't mean that some other faction isn't horrible just because they oppose them politically, ideologically, and so on.
And the reason I'm holding this up is here's the ideological, here's what I'm being told in school, here's the ground truth. Okay, and there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
And, having talked to people from those places who, whose family went through it. I have a friend who his son was in a Seattle school. Now, this guy is a Russian Jew. Okay, his family left. Some of the family got out, the rest didn't. Okay, and they brought into the Seattle, this woman is there talking about how wonderful communism was. And the son held up his hand and said, hi, I have family members who died because of it. And the response was, well, that's interesting. Anyway, what I was saying, it's like, but, it's funny because the answers have become so pat. They're so like, oh, no, that's not real. We know this is what happened. No, here's evidence of these other things happening. But these kids are not being taught. And I had an incident up at UC Boulder. I got called in to give a lecture on personal safety to a sorority. And the room wasn't ready, so my hostess and I were sitting there talking. And we're just having a conversation, and this guy comes by and he hears what I'm saying, and he interjects himself into the conversation. Now, there's a couple of things about this. Number one, the guy was about 6'4", black, and didn't understand personal space. Okay. He was very passionate about what he was saying, and he really had the rap down. But he was speaking right here. Okay. Now, if I was an 18-year-old kid who had never been away from home, this guy would have really intimidated me. But as we know, I don't intimidate well. So, after he realized looming wasn't going to work, and also because I got up and I moved away from where she was. So now, instead of him cornering both of us, he and I are over here. Now, she told me later she was pretty sure it was going to go physical. But the thing was, he's laying out all these points, and I'm laying out counterpoints to what he's saying. And I watched her expression go from like, oh my God, this is going to go violent, to, wait, what? Huh? And she admitted to me later that she had never heard these points I was making in counter to his points.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is a university. How can you not hear this stuff? Right? How can you not know this stuff and how it plays a part into this? Right? But again, you get the useful idiots, these poor kids. And I really do have empathy for these younger people because they are being set up to be cannon fodder.
Yeah. And they don't see it. And unfortunately, we have a lot of parents who also don't see it because they're too busy, with a bunch of other stuff, and the only thing they watch is the mainstream media, which is supporting narrative from political sides and so on, but doesn't necessarily give you good information. We've seen that in the last few years with the pandemic. But the thing I always think is that in part all this is inevitable. In another part, another aspect is that doesn't mean you have to become overly cynical and just like, okay, everything's lost and be nihilistic.
Yeah.
Because a client of mine told me recently, yeah, you're Mr. Doom and Gloom. I said, that is true, but it's two things. It's in one part because I'm used to always talking about this kind of stuff and looking into it and looking for, okay, what's going on and this and that, so we can avoid problems. Doesn't mean that I am desperately trying to cling on to whatever safety there is. No, it's just, okay, if you understand that this is an issue, you can handle it. You don't have to get emotional over it. You don't have to panic. Doesn't mean it won't suck or that it's not bad. It's just that, hey, here's an issue that I see. Right, we'll see what happens. If you see, for instance, in the beginning of the pandemic, everybody was going out for toilet paper. People were fighting on parking lots because of that. And I was like, that is not an issue. This is not a necessity that you can't do without. It's a comfort, but there are solutions. And I was in the aisle and I took a photo of that and put it on social media. I said, look, this is the aisle of toilet paper, all gone. The other side of that aisle is wet wipes and so on.
Mm-hmm.
That works too, people. We use it with babies as well.
Yes.
They were all there. Nobody bought those. So, and go
Yeah,
ahead.
they don't look. Being prepared doesn't mean being paranoid. Understanding what's coming and how to see it coming and avoid it doesn't mean you have to become a wacko. On the other hand, it kind of helps to understand where things can go
Yeah,
and like what are you doing to do it. Like, I'm learning how to garden. Okay. In Colorado, that's a really big issue. It's not that, oh, it's going to be the end of the world. It's like, the weather patterns here are a bitch to grow stuff. you know so you need to know about that. And you know working your way into it of you know our grandparents, or maybe great grandparents. um when I first went to Poland, and it had been after the Iron Curtain had fallen, and I walked through this town, and there was a lot of subsistence farming. Keep on getting that word wrong. This wasn't pretty flowers. This was growing food
yeah,
because they'd lived under the communist regime for years, and to have food, they needed to, and they just got in the habit of doing it.
yeah.
Right. And I mean, you've been to China, you've been to, Eastern Bloc countries. Okay. Do you remember seeing people growing food?
Well, yes and no. Some places, yes, but like I was in Moscow, I think it was '93, and that was like just before Boris Yeltsin was going to be elected, just before all that
Mm.
craziness happened. I've told this many times before, but for the new listeners, we were driving to the stadium. I was there for a competition, and there was always this gathering in this big open square that was going on. So one day I asked our interpreters, like, what is that? And he says, that's a trading market.
Mhm.
And that was people showing up with one shoelace, a plastic bag,
Mhm.
whatever. And they try to trade up until they get something that they could use to whatever, because they were trying to survive.
Yes.
And this was in the early '90s. That's not that long ago, Russia was a bad, bad place. In the hotel, which was cockroach filled, by the way, it was once a beautiful hotel, but it was run down basically because of there was no money for anything. We ate stale bread. We ate green eggs. We ate bread that had been chewed on by clearly either rats or something else. And the hospital, the hotel staff said, please do not go out when it's dark because we won't see you again. You're not going to make it. Doesn't matter how tough you are. We won't see you again. That was Russia in the 90s. And people were trying desperately to survive.
Yes. And I mean, they don't, people do not believe that that can happen to them.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not going to be fun. And I mean, watching people flee the cities, right? And like when you have companies that are saying we're done, that's not helping anybody.
Yeah. I'll put a link in the show notes to the article. I did it with both my kids, and again, also for the new listeners, this story. When they were 18, I took them with me for about half a day. We spent, the day doing a lot of stuff, and I did a lot of talking. I said, "You're a legal adult now. So on the one hand, yay for me because you're now responsible for yourself. It's no longer me. But with that responsibility come a lot of rights. You can tell me to get lost and take off and never come home again. I can't do anything to stop you. I would be very sad. I'd hope to see you, some more in the future. But now it's on you. You're an adult." And I said, this is the last time I'm going to talk to you, and that I would like you to listen to what I have to say. And after that, I'll be the coach in your corner. Always love you. You're always welcome. But you're going to have to start living your life. So I took them to the harbor of Antwerp, which is one of the biggest in the world. I think third or fourth now. Used to be number 2, but hugely important harbor. And we were driving through it through all the industry that is there. We've been driving for about 10 minutes. And I said, look at your GPS on your phone. Look where we are. You can see where we started for driving for 10 minutes. Look, you can see all the industry that is right there. On your phone, you can see how little we've seen of everything that is there. It's a city in and of itself with tens of thousands of people coming to work there every single time. And I said, look, whatever you think needs to change in the world on a fundamental level, you first need to have an alternative to this. Because this is what keeps it going.
Yes.
This is the nuts and bolts of modern society. All the big oil refineries, all the chemical plants and so on that you may hate. It's fine. But now look in the car, look at the clothes that you wear, everything you have on you. The vast majority of that stuff is made by the people there. Because that is what you need, the raw materials that you need to have the clothes, to have your cell phone, to have your fancy iPhone, to have this, to have that. The car that I drive, the glasses that I have on my face, all that stuff that comes from that machine. Now, if you think you need to change it, that's fine. But before you do, have a working alternative that scales all the way up to tens or hundreds of millions of people. Because if you don't, it comes crashing down. And it can stop working. We have this sometimes called blackouts. It's called the water doesn't run. It's called the sewage system is blocked and so on. There are thousands upon thousands of people every freaking day and night, every day of the year, who are working behind the scenes to make all this possible. Now, when they stop and that machine stops, you will be in a Walking Dead society very quickly. Because everything's gone. You don't want that. And all those revolutionaries who want to change the world and topple the system and this and that, I'm like, you guys have no freaking clue how this runs. Because years ago on your Facebook wall, there was this guy who was saying all this, we need to, revolution is needed and break the system and blah, 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 and it's corrupt, nothing can save it. We need to just violently, if need be, take over and this and that. And I was like, okay. Is that just you deciding for everybody else, or do other people get a say, like your family, your wife, your children? Do they get a say in this revolution or not? And every revolution has casualties, including, on your side. So do they get to decide that they might die because of your revolution or not? He refused to answer. I'm like, fine, you don't want to answer that one. How many people is your revolution worth? So if you're like 10 people died, no, it's okay. 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. How many casualties before you say, no, it isn't worth it? 1 million? 10 million? And his answer was, yeah, well, you can't calculate those odds realistically. So, doesn't matter. I'm like, you, dear sir, are a genocidal maniac.
Yes.
That's what you are.
And that is, again, you're talking about killing or people dying, and you're talking about hardships,
Yeah.
and you have no idea what's involved. You've never killed a chicken, you know, and I mean, that's one of the things I talk about in my past where, it's not just have I hunted and killed, and then eaten what I've done. I've been in situations where I had to kill in order to eat. And that's not fun. That's why I don't hunt today, right? But it's one of those things of when your survival is predicated on certain things that you've grown accustomed to other people handling. When they aren't there to handle it, your life is going to take a totally different direction.
Yeah.
And
And
it's good that you took your kids to show them that.
yeah, I also did things like, I walked to the red light district with my boy. Uh, and an hour before that, we went to the really, really expensive part of Antwerp where one of my clients used to live. And when they were kids, when I was just divorced, the client was very generous. And I said, look, I can't come train you. I have the kids. The only thing that I see is, can they come with me? And I'll watch a movie. And yes, that's fine. So for years, they went there. Very, very grateful to that client for doing that. But he lived in an incredibly beautiful, huge mansion and this and that. And we went there, and I said to my son, "Do you recognize this?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, remember that guy and all the movies you watched next to the gym and the candy that he gave you? Yes, that's his house." And like, "Oh, wow." I said, "Okay, this is the top of society. You want to get there, you're going to have to work really hard, get really lucky, and so on. But if you want to go for that, I mean, by all means, you have my blessing." An hour later, we're walking to the red light district, which in Antwerp is pretty well regulated nowadays. It's not like Amsterdam, but it's pretty decent. And I said, look at these girls. Okay. They're the bottom of society. Actually they aren't. There's lower than that, but this is getting pretty low.
Yeah.
Now, if you stay here watching, you'll see all sorts of people walking into their little cubicles and glass windows and so on to be a customer. See all kinds of people showing up here. That's the other side of it, including the people living in those big mansions.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go really fast from all the way up high to all the way down here, or lower still. If you might want to hobnob with the rich and go that way, but remember that these people, these girls sitting right here, they are also deserving of your respect.
Mm-hmm.
If only as human beings. If that's all you can muster, that's fine, but they are human beings just like those rich people over there. And then we talked some more about the reason for why I divorced their mom and so on. And I said, look, and now it's on you. Do better than I did. Let the cycle stop with me. That you're the last generation that went through what I did, and that you guys do better. But now like this is how the world works. You don't have to like it. I don't like it, but it is what it is. Don't get crushed by the system. Understand how it works and live your best possible life. And I
Yes.
said, vaya con Dios,
Mm-hmm.
conquer the world, my son or my girl.
Yeah. Go. Go.
You,
Yeah. Go be you and be good at it. And and that's the one thing that I really appreciate what you did with your kids, because so many of the kids I meet, um, you know, they're actually multi-generational, well, my parents believe this, I raised this, and I never questioned it. Other kids, however, are in total rebellion. And I mean, I know a number of kids who have drank the Kool-Aid on these ideologies who have totally divorced themselves from their families.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's like, you know where that ends up, don't you? It's not on the top.
yeah. And this, I mean, I think the best analogy that we have now is the Cultural Revolution in China.
Mhm.
Because everything that we see now with the tribalism that is from the ideological aspect is very similar to what happened then. People don't know what it is. What was it? The five evils or the five this or that? I forget what it was called. That needed to go. Like
Yeah.
religion needed to go, and culture and history needed to go. Needed to be replaced. The struggle sessions. A lot of people
Oh,
don't even know what that is. That I mean, there are so many analogies,
yes.
and there's this I think this Chinese lady who she ran either for Congress or Senate, I don't remember, but she said she's in the U.S. and she said I fled that. My parents fled China
Right.
because of that, and I come here and now I hear the same thing. It is
And
the
it's
exact same thing, the same words, the same principles, the
right.
same tactics. It's the same thing. They said, and she's like, I'm going to fight. Okay,
Hmm.
I couldn't back then, but now I'm fighting.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, not literally, obviously, but fighting politically, uh, going against that. Yeah,
And that's where like cancel, you know, the thing is like when you cannot speak out against, I actually, let me back up. I find it hysterical where the big brouhaha is speaking truth to power, right? That was their slogan, and now it's the canceling people who are speaking truth to their power.
yeah.
And it
Go ahead.
don't see the irony there, do you?
Well, the point that I make nowadays is also, and one of the reasons why I'm a political orphan is that when I was young, and this is, I think it is about 40 years ago, there's this folk singer who made a lot of humorous songs and did TV shows and this and that. And he made a song called "A Cradle Filled with Straw," and it's about the birth of Christ. But it's a funny song. He jokes. I remember watching the news then, and there were cardinals sitting in TV studios saying how horrible this was and how terrible and disgusting and da 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 da. Big, 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 big scandal.
Yeah.
When I was young, it was the conservative, religious right mostly that was very much authoritarian. Now it's
Hmm.
the left that is authoritarian. I don't care. I really don't care if it's left, center, or right. I just don't want that boot on my neck. That's it.
Yeah.
So whatever your politics are, if you're an authoritarian, then I'm like, I'm out. You lose me. And if you say, well, you cannot talk to those people because they're bad, or freedom of speech, but not for those people, then like you are on the wrong side of history because historically speaking, the people advocating for censorship, they're not the good guys. They're the
Yeah.
bad guys.
Yes. And again, it's the thing is trying to speak to other people. And you bring up struggle sessions. The thing is, if you look at the history of communist China, um, Mao, when he was hiding in the mountains, right, was doing terrible things to his own people, right? And then when they came into power, they were still doing terrible things. And then the Cultural Revolution, and it's like so many people. I tell people that I was raised a California liberal. I still hold those ideas. I'm yeah, let's say political orphan, but I prefer to define myself as a pragmatist, right? Same concept though, because neither of these groups are, you know, yet I still hold those same ideals that I was raised with. Okay. Um, and yet the groups have left, and yet I know people who are quiet liberals, quiet, conservatives, etc., and they have to be, because if they say anything that goes against the narrative, okay, they're going to get lynched,
Yeah.
and often by people from their own side, right? And the silence of the fear that these people live under, that it's like, I can't say this because, I'll get fired, I'll get canceled, I'll get out. And it's funny because I tell people who, will mouth the platitudes that, look, this is what's going on. It's becoming authoritarian. And they're like, no, it's not. It's like, well, tell you what, why don't you try this? Why don't you say something that is not along the party line and see what happens?
Yeah.
Just as an experiment. And they don't.
I said that to a journalist a few years ago when Trump was running, was just president for maybe a year or two. And the journalist was arguing that it was all the violence was coming from the conservatives and this and that. And I'm like, tell you what, you're in Washington, put on a MAGA hat, a red one, and walk down the street and see if you are unscathed when you get to the end of the street. If nobody hassles you, if you don't get the violence. And
Mhm.
the reply was, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm like, thank you. You just proved my point.
Yep.
And this whole idea of there is a good side is for me it's incomprehensible. I'm like, please study some history. It doesn't matter if it's left or right. Socialism, it hasn't been tried before. You could go back to basically the English Revolution to find similar ideas being tried and failing epically. And if we get, yeah, but it was never real socialism. My response is nowadays, okay, I understand you say that. Two things. First, real capitalism has also never been tried. Like there's always been government influence, intervention, and regulation. So how about we give that a try? If that is your answer, it's like the real thing needs to be tried. And
Mhm.
second is that, and you are the one to bring it, the real thing. It's like where everybody else failed, you are so awesome that you can do that. I'm like, you must be God because that's the only answer. Everybody's wrong. History is wrong. You are right. And
Right. Answer to that, and I love it, is I I can't remember the exact number, but like 50 countries have tried communism. I'm making that up. It's not accurate, but um his comment was, do you know that in all of those countries, the best and brightest minds were sent to college to figure out ways to make it work, and they failed.
I'm drinking some more, by the way,
I get that.
because we're going down that route. So I need to need more whiskey.
The defense of the idea, and watching the degree that these guys go to defend the idea. Come on, there we go. Um, it's like you've drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah,
You're not listening to somebody who have, or even people who've been there, right? And I mean, this is kind of like talking to a Holocaust survivor. Well, I don't think it was that bad. Talk to these people. They were there. Okay. Talk to people who lived under communist regimes. They were there.
yeah,
Okay. Talk to people who, by the way, fled the Balkans when all of a sudden, the tribalism went violent, right? Talk to these people, because that's the other side of what you're pushing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think forget who it was, but when Auschwitz was liberated after the Second World War, whoever was the general, or it might have been Eisenhower, I don't remember who it was, said that, okay, take pictures of everything here. And they asked why. He says, because somewhere down the line, somebody will say that it never happened.
Yeah.
When they were going through basically all the corpses that were there and all the horrors that happened there, that eventually somebody's going to say it didn't happen. Same thing is true. I mean, like that professor that I was talking about, I had just been reading about the mass graves they were still digging up in Russia from the whole revolutionary era and beyond, of just thousands upon thousands of people who were just slaughtered. The communist regime is like, no, 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 it wasn't that bad. I'm like, okay,
Yeah, it was.
it was. And there's a really I would say good movie or documentary. It's called The Art of Killing, which is about the Indonesian Revolution, in which they interview the people who were the butchers who did the torturing and the killing, and they reenact it. And at one point, there's this one guy who shows how they would basically string up people by the throat and so on. And, and I don't speak any of the local languages, so I can't really tell. But it looked mostly genuine to me that he suddenly realized when he was reenacting it and pulled the rope the cable tight. He's like, "Oh, this is what they felt." And this kind of realization, the director and the crew kind of brings them to that point. It's like, do you guys now realize what you did? And we can talk about the whole the whole thing. That's not an important part, but it's just how far it can go and how quickly it can escalate.
Right.
Because you guys had that. I mean, during the George Floyd riots, and I think it was happened that this one of the guys who was rioting basically shot a guy. Why? Because he was a MAGA supporter. It's just like that, and it happens on the other side as well. I mean, I'm not picking side. I'm just saying, like, it's like we're justified because this is outrageous. We're angry. We're outraged, and then mob mentality takes over. There's lawlessness and so on. All of a sudden, people get shot. It's like, I don't know, it happens. Like, okay, that's the society you want to live in. Good luck with that.
Something I don't know if your folks know. There's a thing called the horseshoe theory, and that is the horseshoe. And what the idea is the extremes of either side are more close to each other than they are to the central, right,
Yeah,
of their moderate side of their own party. So you look at it, and it's not, well, you guys do it too. It's like, hi, when you're in this area, this is what happens. This is the mindset, because you get into, the group mindset, the mass movement. Eric Hoffer is a really good guy to read. The True Believer, right? Where the thing is, the behaviors are the same regardless of what the politics are,
yeah,
right? And that's where you talk about, you mentioned earlier that you really have to admit to yourself and do something about the fact that your side has crazies too,
yeah.
and that
But
they're willing to know that. And if you don't want them to be running the show, right? If you truly believe in your ideals and you want to do good, you don't go down the crazy train, right? But admitting that, hey, there are crazies on your side who will do this, who want to do this, and who de-individualization is the term. It's when people act in a group thinking that, you know, in the group this is okay, do things that they wouldn't do individually. Okay, they themselves in their normal, hi, I'm a good person, would never dream of doing it, but in a group they would.
yeah,
The weird thing about that is that the numbers change. So maybe if 10 people are doing it, or 9 people are doing it, the 10th person will join. Okay, maybe 99, the 100th person, or the guy can just think that he's got the support of a group. So he's all by himself, but he thinks there's this imaginary group. Now, the weird thing is that some people will never cross that line, but where that line is varies for most people. And the thing where people who will be talking about this, they're saying this stuff, oh, yeah, you know, all the MAGA supporters should be stripped of their rights. Okay. It's not that they're going to do it themselves, but them saying it is going to encourage somebody to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Somebody's going to take them saying that as permission. So they deny, oh, that, no, I don't mean that. It's like, I don't care what you mean. Somebody's going to take it as such. Right? And that's where, like, yeah, during the riots, oh, he's wearing a red hat, a MAGA hat. Bam. Right? Or, oh, you're a white supremacist, so whatever we do to you is acceptable.
Yeah, that whole thing started with the whole punch a Nazi thing. That was years ago, and Ivan said, so for the people who don't know, this was this interview with this actually white supremacist many years ago, and somebody walked up to him and punched him in the face, and then the discussion started like, is it okay to punch a Nazi? A lot of people said yes, and I said no, because who decides who the Nazi is?
Mm-hmm.
You?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see how that could go wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And if you give yourself permission to punch him, what is next? Hit him with a stick, stab him, shoot him. How about his family? Is his family of the hook or not? Because after all, they're probably Nazis too. So the question is more about people being so tribal that they don't recognize why we have principles and why
Yeah.
it's a good thing to apply them equally, including to your own side. Now, I'm the first one to admit that I'm human like the next guy, and I fall short, but I try real hard to stick to principles, and it's difficult and it's complex and so on. But I think one of the key issues is like we've said a few times, that you have to call out your own side when they're nonsense and the extremists, because if you don't, or you use weasel words, or you give half non-apologies and so on, the other side will say, see, they're all like this.
Yes.
And then they will not be willing to call out their own extremists and so on. And bit by bit, we get to where we are now, where it's just the lunatics are running the asylum. And,
Yes.
and it's just the extremists get all the attention, and more
Well,
and more people follow.
okay, let me ask you a question. How long has it been since you were last punched?
Oh God, what is it? Wednesday? That was Monday.
Yeah. Okay. Um, Same thing. You know, I'm actually now teaching sword fighting. Okay. So, with me, it was like, when was the last time somebody tried to split your skull with a sword? Tuesday. Okay. The thing is, you have experience with violence. Okay. You've worked the door. I still remember that damn alley that place that just no. Um, the thing is, with that experience of violence, and oddly enough, the experience that you have with violence tends to make you less hot to trot about doing it,
Yeah.
right? Because you've seen the bad side of it. But people who've never experienced violence, right? Or who think that somebody using words against them that hurt them is violence. Okay. They have way less hesitation about it, especially when somebody else is doing it for them.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of a scary thing of it's not real to them. One of the most and it was weird in light of all the shit I've been through. Something that made me just go, yeah, was I was walking away from a situation. I looked back over my shoulder and I was leaving boot prints of blood as I was walking away. And that just that hit me on a level that was not pleasant, right? And not really and so when people talk about violence of, yeah, we'll do this, we'll use force against these people, we'll go punch a Nazi. It's like, do you know where that can lead? And the answer is no.
No. And then we get back to all, people not knowing history and the cycles longer than one lifetime and so on. The thing I see is that, for instance, we've got a lot of 20 somethings, 20, 30, and 30 somethings that are really, really all the way into that ideological nonsense and kind of lost their way. But what I see now when I talk to some, 14, 15-year-olds is that that is now what they are going against. The younger generation always goes against whatever is the establishment. Well, what we call the woke culture, the woke thing is basically pretty much standard now. And they're like, no, we don't want anything. 13, 14, 15-year-olds over here that I've talked to, not all of them, but a bunch of them are like, no, that we don't want that. We just like, no. So they're actually, in many ways, turning out to have more conservative opinions than actually very progressive ones.
In conservative, it's I don't necessarily want conservative, but just not as crazy.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, it's picking up steam, the reaction to it. Now, this is positive and this is also negative. Like the a lot of people, like the Budweiser thing. I don't know if you follow that.
Oh, I with Schadenfreude.
So for the people who don't know that, so Budweiser did this promotion for a trans individual named Dylan Mulvaney, and a lot of people said like, we don't want any of that. That is nonsense. So they basically boycott Budweiser, and they've lost like many, 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 many dollars over that. The market cap went down, stock went up again, but we'll see. A lot of people don't get that. Is what we will actually see, what the result of all that is when Q2 earnings come out. So when the sales reports are in and they have to publish all that data, then they will see how bad they're getting hit. Anyway, long story short, a lot of people are like, no, we don't want any of that. It used to be a few years ago that people wouldn't really dare to talk against, the narrative of postmodernism, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and so on. And when I talk about that, a lot of people misunderstand it and think like, oh, you're against that. No, no, no. I'm against the way it is being implemented. The principles, not necessarily against the idea itself. Obviously, we should care about people, and some people have it worse than others, and we need to help them. Obviously, that should be a given. It's the way that you go about trying to do what you claim you're doing. That's what I disagree with.
Right.
Not that we need to help certain people. My godmother was handicapped. Yeah, I'm in favor of helping people who have a really bad luck. Draw in life, and they have shitty cards in life, and yeah, let's help them. But what you guys are doing, that causes more division. And the end result is that what we see now is that more and more people are basically saying like, okay, it's enough. Why? Because it's getting more and more extreme to the point that it's just becoming a parody. It's nonsensical. I mean, I'm trying to get somebody on the podcast to talk about transgenderism in sports, because then I want to talk about combat sports, which is what I have experience with, and in that area, this has been done. Women fighting men, this has been done. Yeah, we know the outcome. We know how that typically goes. So if and I don't know if it's gonna work out, because it's a pretty high profile. I'm not gonna say a name until it's confirmed. But that discussion needs to be had, because you guys in the US, it's really, I mean, that's a hot button topic nowadays. But in Scandinavia, in the UK, they're actually saying that, you know, we have to stop doing all these surgeries, and they're radically changing the way they approach all this, which was like, until like even last year, you couldn't say that out loud.
Yeah.
Now, and again, I repeat, I stress, that doesn't mean we don't have to care for people who are having issues, who are having medical problems, psychological, and so on. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that some of the answers that people give are by far not a good idea. Now,
Yeah.
the whole reason why I said that is just to say that the reaction against that is coming so much quicker and is much louder, and there's more and more people saying that. And this brings me to one of the things that I was talking about with somebody else recently. And I said, look, historically, where I live here, there were three pillars of our culture. It was the basically the Gaelic, so the really the ancient population that lived here millennia ago. We've had the Greco-Roman influence, and we had the Christian / Roman Catholic influence, the three pillars. And if you look at our society, that's basically everything comes from that. But the last few decades, we had a fourth one, and that is the American culture one.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. We gave you Jean-Claude Van Damme, so I'd say we're even.
It's hitting below the belt.
And the thing is that when I was with my boy for his 18th birthday, we ended up in this near this fountain where there was a statue, and there was this that was around, you know, a little bit after the George Floyd thing happened, and there were riots and you know, trying to topple statues here and throwing paint on them and so on. And one of those statues, there was this graffiti on it. I forget what it was, like equality, inclusion, something. I mean, one of those bang words. And I'm like, you do know who this is, right? This is the guy who actually helped give, you know, freedom to Congo. That's what he did. So that is who you want to cancel. Somebody who actually tried to do something about what you are saying is a problem. So
Yes.
this blind rage against anything, and that was just, I mean, it was like maybe a month or two after George Floyd happened, and you guys had all the riots. That was smack in the middle of the pandemic. All of a sudden, it's okay. Everybody can come together and gather around with thousands of people heaped together. That is fun. By all means, which sounds crazy, right? If we're only a few years later, and we get it now, like, obviously you would say, like, no, we can't let that happen. Our politicians here, they're like, no, no, we understand that this is important, blah blah blah. I'm like, screw you.
Yeah.
We have people who can't see their loved ones die in the hospital. We can't even have a funeral, and you're saying that this tops everything. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
screw you.
That, and I mean, so much of it really. Okay. Something that I'm watching with, again, great glee, is the problems that Disney is having. Okay. Because Disney is the ones who are really pimping a lot of this stuff, and the pushback and the entertainment industry has gone along, right? And now Disney is in deep, deep trouble. Okay, for a wide variety of reasons. One of which is when the political financial corruption aspect is gonna be that's the Achilles heel of Disney right now. But one of the things that I've been watching is, like, they did the live action Mulan, which, by the way, that there is a Chinese movie of Mulan. Okay. And it is horrible in the sense of, holy shit, this is the horrors of war and
Yeah.
what it. Okay. Now, I love the cartoon version. right? I know it's not Mulan. It's funny. Eddie Murphy just did it. Yeah. But when they did the live action Mulan, it bombed in China. Okay. The thing is, as I understand it, the response was that's not our Mulan.
Yeah.
Okay. Shang-Chi from the Marvel bombed as well. Right. So, part of where I have trouble with this, diversity, equality, and inclusion is how much of this is actually corporate manipulation.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, I seem to recall some conversations about tensions in Europe about, you know, different people and not necessarily getting, along. Okay. And the problem with their version of diversity is that they're trying to pitch it as all you need is this one unifying thing, whether it's race, sexual orientation, or gender. Okay. It doesn't take into account that, in the real world, different groups don't like each other. Okay. And some of these dislikes go back, a few thousand years, right? It's not this homogenized, just because this person is, this color automatically means it's a kumbaya fest.
Yeah.
Okay. Um,
There's a good example of that. And if I'm not mistaken, this was in Canada, where there's this beauty salon. And it was, if I'm not mistaken, a Muslim woman who worked there.
Mhm.
And it was a trans individual who came there who wanted to get a Brazilian wax. But
Mhm.
he didn't have surgery, so it's still, technically a man. And the Muslim woman who worked there said, I can't do that because of my religion. I can't do that. And then, this became a big thing. I think there was a lawsuit, but I'm not sure anymore. Anyway, the point is that I asked people who are very much into, the whole postmodernist thing and inclusion, diversity, blah, blah, blah. Who's wrong in this case? Who is the bad one?
Mhm.
The Muslim woman because of her faith, or the transgender who says like that, I'm a woman, even if I still have, male genitals, you have to do this. Who's wrong? And then
Yep.
nobody wants to answer, because then
Right.
they have to go after a protected class, is what they call it. These are marginalized individuals, they are discriminated against, and all of a sudden that goes out the window. And I'm like, you have no principles. The
Yeah.
only thing you really want is to make everybody else submit to your ideology. There
Right.
is no principle
Yes.
except that you want to be in charge, and we have to shut up and do as you say.
Right.
That I'm sorry, but if your ideology doesn't make a lick of sense once you push it down to the end conclusion of logically where it leads to, then you shouldn't be surprised that people uh, are going to fight against it,
Mhm.
because you give them no other choice. You
Mhm.
say comply or else. That's all you have to offer. That is not a society. That is a dictatorship that you want. Are you surprised that people say no? And bit by bit, as more of the more extreme ideology is being implemented by governments, people who are just run-of-the-mill people do a 9 to 5 job, just want to get along, live their life, get home and watch the game on TV. They're like, this is nuts.
Well,
And
I live just down the road from Majestic Bakery. Okay, that's the one where this went to the Supreme Court about baking the cake.
yeah,
Okay. Now, again, ground truth versus what the media is saying. Okay. Denver does have a gay community. Okay. And it's mostly centered around Downing Street. Okay. But when people talk about community, that doesn't mean just everybody's the same group. Okay. I mean, my experience with the gay community was we are talking, you have doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs. right? You have businesses that, cater to that community, and that community supports, right? Another thing here in Denver, we have Federal, which is largely Southeast Asian and Chinese, where there's a shopping center where I can take you in, and we can see the markets, we can see the restaurants, we can see the bakeries, and all like the income tax guy up there, the lawyer, I mean, all these services, okay, that cater to the community. Okay. With the Majestic Bakery, these guys drove past, I
Mm.
mean, they like 30 miles away. They drove past countless bakeries that were gay owned that wouldn't have any problem doing these through the Boys Town area to find this guy and to do the most obnoxious cake possible. And the guy said no. Well, then the diversity exclusion, DEI,
Yeah.
yeah, um, the they had a government agency that had allies on it, and they nailed this guy. And this is what went up to the Supreme Court, right? But it's like, wait, you went out of your way to force this guy to do something. Okay, then you sued him, and then you've got a government commission, right, that is empowered, and again, the bureaucracy. Okay, and it's like, don't tell me this wasn't going out and trying to nail somebody,
Yeah.
right? Um, and yet, because it's for a noble cause, it's justified.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that they call it lawfare instead of warfare. Is you're using the law to wage war, and that brings me to a point that I wanted to make earlier is that I talked about this many years before, and you have as well. It's like when people said, like, look, there's some really nasty people or people with experience with violence or getting ready to actually take action against all this nonsense. And it never really materialized. And I thought it would have gone kinetic. I mean, years ago with all the stuff that was happening, because everything that I know about history said like, okay, this is the exact same thing going on. And it still hasn't happened. Things have changed in many ways, but one of um, the the issues that I see is that I discounted the different generations of warfare. I didn't know enough about that. And when you look at fourth and fifth generation warfare, basically what it boils down to, there is no army. There are no factions that are clear cut and easy to define. You're actually in a war and you don't know it. That is one of the, and fourth and fifth generation warfare, it kind of bleeds into each other. It's hard to basically define and delineate. But the point is that it's a very different way of waging war or
Yeah.
engaging in conflict than the typical example we have when you say civil war. You see the North and the South and armies fighting each other. You see the Second World War and so on. That is not what we're talking about. That is not it. There are different ways to wage war nowadays, and they're being done.
Yeah.
This has been going on for a long, long time, and technology has made it even easier to do that. Uh,
Yeah.
and before I go on with that, just a quick thing, an illustration that I wanted to mention earlier is when we talk about the polarization and people just you can't see it when your own side does it. You guys had, for years this whole Russia collusion thing going on. That basically, in the end, nothing. I mean, nothing really came out of that, despite what a lot of people felt about it. When they said that, well, Russia actually intervened in our elections. I'm like, I'm sure they did, like most countries do. But I can show you, yeah,
Yes.
I can show you a video of then President Obama
Hmm.
talking about how Mr. Macron in France was his friend and how good he was and this and that while the French elections were going. Now, if that is not intervening in a foreign election, I don't know what is. Now,
Oh
for the
God.
people who doubt that, look up, Macron and Obama, where Obama basically endorses him. Now, you can
Yeah.
say that, it's just an endorsement. Maybe it is, but it is interfering in a foreign election,
Yes.
right? So and then we get back to what we said before. If you complain about somebody else doing that, don't do it yourself. And if you're like, oh, but Trump this and Obama's awesome, like, yes, but he did do that.
Yeah.
And you didn't see it because you don't care about it. You, Mark, you didn't see it because you don't follow the French elections. I do. It's the country right next to mine. Okay, kind of has an influence. So I saw that, but you didn't, and you're not aware. But that did happen.
Oh no. We've put our little fingers into politics around the world for a very long
Everybody does. It's freaking geopolitics. It's a
time.
dirty game.
Remember, well, like I said, I'll name a name. The biggest rant I ever heard about the enhanced interrogation was from Slug.
Yeah.
Right. That was truly epic. But yeah, everybody does it. So suddenly squealing about it, it's like, okay, look, we're supposed to keep it subtle and low key, right? So we can like pretend it's not happening. Just don't get outraged about it because we've been doing it, right? But the okay, couple of things. By the way, did you know America did not have a civil war?
I did not know that.
Right. A civil war, by definition, is when you have two legitimate claimants going for control of a country. Okay. It officially got dubbed the Civil War, I think in 1917 or so by Congress. What we had was a failed rebellion because the South wasn't trying to rule the North, they were trying to pull away.
Yeah. Secession.
Yeah, so it was a war of secession.
Yep.
Okay, which by the way, it brings up the whole issue of yeah, was the Civil War about slavery? No, it was actually about secession. Like one group wanted to do it and the other said, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Now the reason for secession was slavery.
And
Right?
and and that's one of the things that um, I remember when I was crap. How old was I been? Must I have been? That was I think 15 or 16 when we learned about First World War, Second World War, and so on in history class in high school. Our teacher made it very clear there are we call it oorzaak and aanleiding. There's causes, and then there's what we would call an instigated incident.
Yes, casus belli.
Yeah, well, it's not exactly that in Dutch, but it's close enough. Franz Ferdinand getting assassinated did not cause the First World War. That
No,
was just the instigating incident.
that lit it off. Right.
And people fail to understand that. I talked about, like we've got a war in Europe going on, like a few countries over in Ukraine. And I talked about this with people. I stopped doing it publicly because again the polarization was like Russia awesome, Russia bad and Ukraine awesome. I'm like, you did you read the reports like from only years ago that Ukraine was one of the most corrupt countries in the world right now,
Yeah,
and
and
it
also
is
by the
also run
human trafficking.
by human trafficking, arms dealing. It's run by oligarchs, just like Russia. The oligarchs are there as well. I'm like nothing against the Ukrainian people at all, and by far, I'm not saying that what Russian doing is great. On the contrary, but like this was predictable. There were plenty of signs that this was going to happen.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
and then we get back to the causes for that war, and then the instigating incident. And when you look at this conflict in 50 years, when in school they will teach about that, hopefully they will teach this in the same way, like what led up to that and what was the instigating incident, and hopefully they'll know more than we know now. But the point is that you can look at this stuff in a non-partisan way. it is actually possible.
Yes.
And it's something you should strive to do. Put aside your politics and ideology and look at what is, like you said, ground truth, what is actually going on. Why is
Right.
this happening? So you can actually get to a solution. And the point I made to people about that the whole time is that, look, if you don't do that, you do not know what the Russians want. Yeah, they just want to conquer everything. I'm like, okay, yeah, that is just like surface level stuff. That fine. Yeah, but what are conditions of victory and defeat for them? What
Mm-hmm.
will make them come to the table and say we want to stop fighting? And what
Mm-hmm.
will make them say, like, okay, we achieved our goals, we're gonna stop
Right.
completely? And where is all the middle ground? And where do you think there could be negotiations? But you cannot do that until you look at it dispassionately and looking at the facts and trying to understand from their point of view. And then I talk to martial artists. All of you are talking for years on end about Sun Tzu. Know your enemy, know yourself, and you will win 1,000 battles. And all of a sudden, now you're like, no, 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 no. We don't have to know our enemy. We don't have to know Russia. Like, what is wrong with you? I know what it is. You're polarized to the extreme. You're ideological. You cannot see the things that you were advocating for only a year ago, spouting the wisdom of Sun Tzu. And
Yeah.
now you're like, no, 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 not now. Like, okay, then again, you have no principles. You have
Yes.
none.
You've sacrificed it. The other thing that I want that you said that triggered a memory. My cultural anthropology professor was my favorite professor in class in college, right? I love this woman. I mean, it was a great class, and I'm really sorry that the field imploded. But she and I were she was talking, and she used a word, and it meant when cultures have been in war for so long that it actually becomes part of their culture.
Yeah,
So you have these two groups that have been in conflict for so long, it's now they're both of their cultures. And I thought, wow, what a great thing. And if I wrote it down, I lost my notes because like 20, 30 years later, I was calling different anthropology departments saying, look, my professor said this word and I don't remember what it is. Do you know? And they're like, that's a great concept. And none of them knew it either. But yeah, the thing that I mean, when you look at it from the standpoint of this dispute between it's not just generational, but it has become part of who they are,
yeah,
right? And yeah, that happens, right? And like, gee, look what happened in what used to be known as Yugoslavia,
yeah,
right? And it's just it's there, it's laying underneath
yeah.
surface, and it will come up. Yugoslavia is, or excuse me, Ukraine is one of those, right?
And this whole idea of, like, the end of history. After the Berlin Wall fell, that was like, okay, this is the end of history. It's over. And now all of a sudden, there's a war in Europe again, with Russia. I'm like, you guys believe that, right? Anybody who knows anything uh, about human nature will be like, okay, no,
Yeah,
no, no.
just no. And again, it's funny because you get people who have been raised in peace in this weird, abnormal period of time where we didn't have you're going to see a cattail here. Oop. Um, but they have no idea of, human nature, history, that, you know, how odd this period of time is.
Yeah,
That we're and the more divided we become, the it's coming back, and I mean, it's coming back with a vengeance.
Yeah.
And that's something that we need to be concerned about. And not that we can, like, one voice stand up and say, "Hey, everybody, this is a bad idea. What do you say we all just get along?" Um, but yeah, it's human nature,
Yeah.
and we're back into it.
And I shared you this one, and I was looking, to find it before we got that. Steve Van Zandt, I mean, good old Steve Van Zandt, who we all like as a musician. He tweeted something that he then deleted,
Yeah,
and it was, basically calling some cussing out Republicans and this and that. And he said, not me, YouTube. He said that Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen X will unite and exterminate these cockroaches once and for all.
yeah,
He deleted it, and then afterwards said that, yeah, but obviously I didn't mean, literally. And I've heard that language more and more the
mhm.
last few years, literally, vermin, cockroaches, and so on, for the opposing political side. And it always reminds me of the genocide in Rwanda, where the Hutus and the Tutsis were fighting, and it's called Radio Milkolin, Radio a Thousand Hills, where they would have basically the hate messages and calling the other side cockroaches. Literally, that's what they call them, and saying that we're going to exterminate you.
Others,
Um, all that, this is human nature.
yes,
This is how humans are, and you only think you aren't that way until you are. I'm sure Steve Van Zandt is on average in daily life a great guy. I don't doubt it, but he seems to be captured by ideology and outrage and anger, and in this case, I would even say hate towards political party that is on the opposite end of his scale. And this kind of stuff he writes now. And then we get back to double standards. I'm like, if you say Trump called for violence on January 6th, what did Steve Van Zandt call for in that tweet?
right, exactly. And
So either both sides can say, well, no, that's I didn't mean literally, or neither side can say it. So pick one. Which one do you want?
both sides need to look at their extremists and say, "Shut the fuck up."
Exactly. Exactly. And
Yeah,
and for the people who love Trump and are Trump voters, and again, I don't vote in the US, and by all means, you can laugh at my opinions, and I will say, and I will freely admit that we have worse politicians than you do. But if if you think that Trump is the best thing since sliced bread, I have no beef with you. That is fine. But he could have done that. He could have done that speech a whole lot better.
oh yeah.
And
They're looking for an excuse to go after
of
Trump,
course,
right? But at the same time, you know, Trump, when what's her name, Hillary Clinton called half of the country a basket of deplorables.
yeah,
That is not really something that it's like, "Hi, aren't you guys supposed to be the peace, love, and dope group?"
yeah,
But again, the tribalism, the division, and calling for action against other groups, right? This is where, like I said, it's really important to think about treating with.
yeah.
Okay. If you've got different ideology than I do, then that's fine and dandy. Okay. But we need to negotiate how we're going to coexist, because calling for the extermination of each other doesn't lead to good places.
No. And this is the point that I made in that Facebook post of mine, is that if that is what you call for, you the only option you give the other side is all out conflict. There is no
Yeah.
compromise. As soon as you say these cockroaches need to be terminated, like Steve Van Zandt just said, then the other side would say, okay, he's coming, he wants people to come for us, then we are going to have to fight back. And then it gets to who fires the first shot. And in those kind of situations, there's always somebody it's going to eventually happen. And again, we get back to what kind of warfare will it be? Well, my guess, fourth and fifth generation. Then that can actually escalate into large scale civil unrest and violence, obviously. But so far it hasn't, and knock on wood that it doesn't. But all that kind of stuff isn't helpful. All that kind of rhetoric isn't helpful at all. And if you can see that from your own side, don't call it out from the other side, because you are escalating the thing by refusing to acknowledge when your side is doing it, whichever side it is.
Actually, I'm going to take that a step further. And I did on my Patreon page, I did a thing. I asked people if they remembered, I saw a movie or maybe a TV show or something, but it was pre-World War II Germany. And you had the German social elite who had bought into the propaganda. And it was them at a cocktail party, and they're just sitting there making really anti-Semitic jokes and slurs, and it's all the smugness.
Yeah.
And as a precursor, seeing we know where it's going to end up, but nobody could remember the name of the thing, and I can't either. But it's not just if your side is doing it, watch if you're doing it.
Yeah.
Right? Because I have heard people who will smugly say pretty much the same thing about the other side, who will say terrible things, will lie like rugs, okay, will misrepresent and straw man, and do it with absolute conviction that they are on the right side of history.
Yeah.
When called upon it, it's like, well, I'm not actually saying you should do that. It's again, we run into that thing of, yeah, you're saying it, and somebody's, whether you mean it or not, which I seriously doubt that your argument that you don't mean it, but that's another issue. There are going to be people who will hear your words and accept them as permission.
Yeah. And that's what I see mostly, that's this lack of rhetorical, basically fair rules that like it used to, like when the animal list, the email list that I've been on for 20 plus years and that you run, and you have the rules of how do we discuss things, and it's just like, well, you have to have a standard that applies to everybody,
Yes.
and you have to apply it to yourself as well. And that is what I see lacking, is they take the worst possible, and again, left and right, everybody, I'm not singling anybody out. What people who are ideologically captured do is take the worst interpretation of what the other side says and then steel man their own side every single time. Their side, they take the best possible, strongest interpretation that there is.
That's what you mean by man? Yes.
Yeah.
And that, and there's always excuses for, well, that's not what it meant. That's not the real thing. That's, um, there's also the, and if it becomes undeniable, then there's two QK. My Latin sucks. Well, you do it too, right? No, it sucks when either side does it. And that's why calling out our own side, whatever side that may be, is like, no, we can't, don't say that shit because you're painting us with a bad brush and you're encouraging the other crazies, right? And that is police your own.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is the deflation of terms is what I call it, is like everything is racist and everything is hate. And like hate is the most overused word of the last decade, if not longer. And the example I always give people is look up Joseph Goebbels, Jewish photographer.
Oh,
But what,
that where he's looking at the guy.
yeah, yeah. For the people who don't know, so Goebbels was like one of the highest ranking Nazis.
Propaganda minister.
Yes, back in the day, and he was doing this photo shoot for whatever he was doing, I forget. And you can see him smiling and this and that, good picture. And then you can see there's a picture of the moment somebody tells him that the photographer is Jewish. The look that is captured in that picture, that is hate.
Yes,
That is
and that
pure hate.
thing, you know, I wonder if the photographer. Well, he obviously had to get out of the building
He
because,
did. He survived. I forget what it was, the details, but yeah.
but how long down the road was it before that guy, that photographer ended up dead? Because that,
I don't remember.
yeah,
I can look it up.
it's right there. And
And
the thing is, so many people think that anger and hate is power.
yeah,
And it's like, if I have anger, if I have hate, I have power. No, you don't.
it's
Okay,
weakness.
of course, but power is influence. Okay, but being, running up and jumping in people's faces and aggressing on them. And I mean, again, coming from my background, you did not walk up to a stranger and get in their face over something that you found offensive. Or if you did, you beat the shit out of
Hmm.
it. Okay. I mean, you backed it up with physical violence. The thing that amazes me is the absolute sense of entitlement that people have, like that guy at UC Boulder, right? He felt it was perfectly okay to walk up and interject himself in a conversation between people he didn't know to tell them they're wrong.
Yeah.
Now, it didn't work out so well for him, but I mean, not in the way that it used to when I was younger. you know, como se dice defenestration? Um, but um, and I mean, the number of people who think it's perfectly okay to come and jump in other people's faces and tell them that they're wrong ideologically. Okay. What? Huh? Well, you offended me, so I have the right to do this.
Yeah, that's not how it works.
Yeah, number one, but number two, also when things go bad, that's where they will often run to the police,
Yeah.
basically weaponizing the government to enforce your bad behavior.
And that is also a big part of it. We've got more and more, and again on both sides, this is increasing. Just this idea of anything that isn't specifically prohibited by the rules is fair game, and on top of that, anything that I can get away with is fair game,
Their game.
no
Yep.
matter if it's just or justified or not. And
Hmm.
and then again, you can do that for X amount of time until you get to the point where the other side says, "Screw that! Now I'm doing that too," and then the gloves come off, and more people are.
And that is actually further down the road. Okay. One of the things I'm co-authoring a book with a therapist about fixing dysfunction right now.
Yeah,
And it's not a here's how to feel good about being dysfunctional. It's hey, this is what you weren't taught about what you need to do to function in society. Okay. Now, we did we're doing a chapter, actually three chapters on relationships. And I was like, I think we better look into this. What are the, younger generations looking at, how are they looking at relationships now? and I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos about this, and just the sense of entitlement that is out there that is guiding people's behaviors. And this is like their everyday behavior. This isn't even the specialized of, hey, I'm going to go out of my way to confront somebody.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, we're talking about this, and I think the folks who are listening need to hear that, yes, this is an extreme, right? Or actually, it's not quite, it's pre-violence, but it's like there's a long lead up to get to this point where they think that they have the right to go out and confront people without consequences. And what does that do? Because, a lot of times my experience with violence is people with experience with violence are always kind of really looking for ways to get off that highway.
Yeah.
Okay, they know this is bad. Let's find some way, and this is where treating with comes to mind. Okay, but folks who don't have that experience see no reason to get off the road. As a matter of fact, they think that's power. Okay, and they don't listen to the signs, or they don't recognize the signs of, you know what, maybe I need to get off this road. Okay. Um, there's a joke about Southern women here who are a breed unto themselves in this country, which is, you know, when a Southern woman says, "What did you just say?" It's not that she didn't hear you. She's giving you a chance to save yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
But these folks are not, they've gotten away with it for so long that they think there's no other option than people bowing down to it.
There's something that I probably a misnomer, but I call it enforceable negotiations, meaning that many people misunderstand me and make mistake when they deal with me, because I will go out of my way to avoid conflict,
Mhm,
because I have not much to gain, and I'm the walking cliche of the asshole martial artist. I'm a big, strong guy. I'm a heavyweight, and so on. I've got resting grumpy face, so even when I'm just neutral, people think I'm angry. And if I get into a conflict, I mean, immediately people think it's his fault because I look the part.
mhm,
I would go out of my way to avoid conflicts and de-escalate. However, I can force you to negotiate with me,
mhm,
and I will do so without force at first. But if again, like the whole Game of Thrones meme nowadays, Queen Cersei says, I choose violence. You can choose violence if you want to, and I will engage with you on that level if you want to. It might not turn out the way you prefer, um, but if that's what it is, then that will be what it is. It's not that I don't necessarily have the competence to meet you on that front. It's that I prefer not to. But if it needs to happen that way, then it will, and I will not play it the way that you think it should be played, because then we're in a different dimension, so to speak. And that is something I feel a lot of people have been missing, is that, look, violence is not a game, and if you threaten violence, or if if you're like that guy that you met is in your face and this and that, you're basically giving all the signals that you're going to be violent, but coming just shy of doing it in the hopes of intimidating the other party. Well, don't be surprised when they take you up on it, and all of a sudden you do have violence on your hands, and then you're like, "Oh my god, what happened? I was just, shouting at him that he was an asshole." Okay.
yeah, right there, that sums it up. And I mean, that was actually why it didn't go violent, because he was doing stuff that was designed to intimidate me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I got calluses on my intimidation glands. Right? It just, I mean, as my favorite line that came up spontaneously, but I ended up using a lot. I hate to tell you this, but I've been called worse and more accurately by my mother. So, this whole intimidation tactic is, it's funny because humans are actually very nonviolent animals individually. In groups, we are terrifying, but individually, we are nonviolent animals. Having said that, we are really bad about threatening violence. And I don't mean that we're like, we suck at it, but the fact that we do it all the time. Okay. So are you planning violence? Well, no. Well, then you probably shouldn't be trying to sell it.
Yeah.
You know, you need to do this. It's like, hi, you're threatening violence right now. I'm just making my point. I'm very excited. No, 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 no. You're threatening violence right now to get me to buckle into and give you what you want.
Yeah. And that is a game that a lot of people will eventually discover that you end up on the losing end sooner or later, and you better pray that it's not against the person who will make you pay a permanent price for that. I mean, I interviewed Monty a little while ago, and he worked as a bouncer for
Yeah, yeah.
now, and he talks about this situation where he has to kick a guy out and this and that, and the guy makes a move as if going for his back, and Monty is about to draw his firearm, and he basically says to the guy, "You have to be, move really slow right now, and I really think about what you're doing because he's about to shoot that guy."
Yes.
And that guy, no, I'm just going for my wallet because he had to pay his bill in the bar. He hadn't paid it because Monty was like, "Yeah." And that guy didn't realize how close he came to getting shot.
Oh,
Basically,
yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, that is when you're, again, people without experience with violence think that it's going to be one-sided, and I talk about the two-sided shooting range, right? But I also say it's a different side, it's a different game when the other side shoots back,
yeah,
or two-way shooting range. That's it. That, when you get to that level, it's kind of hard to back down by then.
yeah,
But, when you've done everything in your power to make the other person believe that that's how it's going to go, right? Um, don't be surprised when they believe you.
yeah. And it's also this mental and psychological or emotional also inertia. Is it has you moving in one direction? Is that it's very hard to change directions, even if you notice that, okay, this might turn bad any second now. Even then, it's difficult for a lot of people to just hit the brakes, turn around, and go into the other direction, back off, let it go. Very difficult.
A huge part of that is they have been going so far and suddenly they realize, oops, but they've got so much inertia going that even if they realize that it's going to go bad, it's too late to back down,
Yeah,
right? That comment about his mother was the final straw, and it's like, oh, I crossed the line. And trying to back down at that moment looks like hypocrisy,
yeah,
right? And it's like, no, no. And I mean, some people will just blow by that moment of realization this is about to go bad, and they keep trash talking. But a lot of times, it is more a matter of they've overcommitted, and now they can't back out.
yeah.
And I don't doesn't mean they don't wanna. They can't back out.
And that's actually a good segue for us to wrap up and get to the bonus part for my patrons, because there's bunch of really good questions for you, and one of them is along those lines. And
Okay.
before we wrap up, because we've been going for a while, where do you see all this going? I mean, the way society is going right now. If you know look into your crystal ball and you look a few years into the future, what do you think is most likely to happen?
I don't think it's going to be one massive explosion. I think it'll be a lot of little fires, and that is going to be made even worse if the economy goes sideways. Okay. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've been in Europe. I don't know what the homeless situation is.
Getting worse.
Okay. It's bad here. And we have huge chunks of people who are just off, they're out of control because the legal system is not dealing with them. You've got that. Then you have the radicalized crazies. So and the system that we have can't handle them. So, how long I think we're going to be in for a very long period of flare-ups.
Yeah.
And I mean, I hate to tell you this, but we actually have states in this country that are bigger than your entire country.
Yeah.
Okay. So the difference between something happening in your country, which literally is right down the road, versus this country where we have like maybe 2,000 miles in between, right? So, I mean, I think it's going to be a lot slower, but there'll be a lot of little flare ups as an ongoing thing. And that's more here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, speaking for Europe, what I see is that the biggest danger is a banking crisis on top of an economical crisis, because Germany just shut down its last nuclear reactors. They've
Yeah.
never, pushed out so much CO2
Yeah.
ever, I think, which means that Germany is the end economical engine of Europe. There's deindustrialization happening, and
Yeah.
I mean, big industries have to move away because they don't have secured energy. They need constant and
Yeah.
stable, trustworthy energy resources, and Germany won't be able to offer that. Belgium is obviously going the same route. Of course, why would we not? France is
Well,
going a different route because they're going to build new ones. But the point is that when energy becomes scarce, societies tend to devolve
yeah.
into worse kinds of what it used to be. And I think that's a big issue. Along with the rise of populism, we have elections next year. We just went through another scandal today. Actually, one of the ministers resigned, and the far left and the far right are on the rise in my country.
Yeah.
That is clear. I mean, all the polls are showing that. What could go wrong?
Hmm.
What?
Uh, long list. Yeah. Actually, I'm going to add two more things: banking, energy. Yes, those are big issues. Um, the thing is, the break the economy as well as the global supply chain.
Yeah,
Those, I think, four things, if they're going to be things that really kick things off, it's going to be problems there.
yeah.
So,
People haven't really realized that we're going into changing to a multipolar world, as opposed to the unipolar world that we used to. Like, US was the remaining superpower, and that was it.
yeah,
We have, China is a rising superpower. India is
yeah,
rising as well. A lot of people are still sleeping on that. But the main thing is, as this multipolar world is going to happen, China is decoupling its economy from the rest of the world, and in particular the West.
Yep.
So there's a lot of things that are happening, and a lot of stuff was only possible because the last few decades money was cheap, and we
Yep.
basically outsourced everything to China and other and similar countries so that we
Yep.
could get cheap stuff. Those days are gone.
And or they're going.
Yeah.
And that is a how that's going to happen, we don't know yet.
Yeah, and then there's the citizen's trap with the rising superpower coming into conflict with the waning superpower, which is the latter is the US, the former is China, and it's not like the rhetoric of around Taiwan has been simmering down of late. Quite
Yeah.
on the contrary.
And yet at the same time, when I talk about um, the supply chain, one of the things people talk about China aggression in the South China Sea, okay, that they're doing this military stuff, et cetera, et cetera. And the people I've spoken to about that are less about the military expansion than trying to get food to the people of China. China's in deep trouble. And, you know, that's ooh, you know, hungry people are troublesome people.
Yeah, China needs to secure its naval supremacy. That it needs that to survive,
Yeah.
and that drives a lot of the conflict that we see with Taiwan, but also beyond.
Yeah.
They're plundering Africa, which they've been doing for quite some time,
Oh,
which
yeah.
nobody talks about in the West, regularly. That's like
Well,
it's not happen. There's a video out there where you can see in one of these companies that is running. I forget which African country it was, where this Chinese like foreman who is whipping a
yeah.
black guy below.
Uh-huh.
Now, if that happens in the US, I mean, there's going to be the George Floyd riots will be nothing compared to what happens. That Chinese foreman is whipping that
Yeah.
black guy, and nothing in the American press, nothing. So, and I'm like, you guys have no idea how bad it can get
Yes.
when those people get into power. You have no idea.
Again, it is, uh, the United States is big enough to have flare ups. And yet, I mean, people are something else that's really growing is the number of people who have really bought into the narrative. And then you have people who are getting sick and tired of
Yeah.
it. And, you know, there's the thing is that will they continue to play the game if they're sick and tired of it?
Well, the only thing that I can see that might be in the long run a positive influence is now like whatever you think of Dylan Mulvaney, the whole Budweiser thing, that big companies will see the whole ESG thing, environmental societal governance thing,
Yeah, yeah,
and then DEI on top of that, is that it also has a potential downside because you're pissing off your customers and they're
yes.
saying like not buying your product anymore when big companies, who are basically doing all this ESG and DEI stuff because it's a way to see, look how awesome we are, but they don't mean it, which is putting it mildly. When they see, oh, if we do this wrong, we're going to pay a price for it, and our investors won't be happy with that. Maybe we need to reel back a little bit. So when the money dries up for all the activists, and it might dry up because of that, it might dry up because of the economy going bad and the banking crisis and so on. But if the money dries up, a lot of that stuff will eventually go away, or at the very least, simmer down a little bit because there won't be money to pay for all these activists.
And that's why I'm watching the entertainment industry because I'm thinking that's kind of the canary in the coal mine
Yeah.
where I mean, like if Disney with all their subsidiaries really takes a hit, okay, how soon or how long afterwards will the other, you know, industry like Netflix, like Amazon, you know, how if Disney gets nailed, right? And it looks, by the way, like they're actually going to get rid of the Star Wars, that's the rumor.
Yeah.
Okay. If they take the hit, how far will behind will the other ones be? And then how far behind will, I mean, like, gee, after what happened with Budweiser or Bud Light, which by the way, even for American beer, that's piss. Okay, okay, I mean, um, but when the money dries up,
Yeah.
and see, that's something that really I think a lot of this stuff with the media and the entertainment and also, advertising and the policies like Blackstone, I think is what they're called. But
BlackRock.
hmm?
BlackRock.
Yeah. Um, when the money starts dwindling, how fast are they going to change? Now, this is going to be like a slow dinosaur, but will it be changing? Because people are also discovering that they can stand up. And I mean, Budweiser, it's funny because Budweiser has been one of the biggest uh, contributors towards the Republican
Yep.
Party,
Yep.
right? And they're trying to like, come on, guys, be kind to Budweiser, to Anheuser-Busch, right? They're making all these silent, and people are like,
Yeah, and the thing I see is that there's also, something called the parallel economy. I think that's Dan Bongino who started that, which is basically a collective of all kinds of businesses of people. So like, look, we are promoting traditional American values, and give us our money, give us your money. Sorry, but
yeah,
buy from us. We'll ship, all over the U.S. and this and that. So you don't have to buy from the brands that are doing all the woke stuff and this and that you don't like. Which means that, and that seems to be growing from as far as I can see. And if that grows, eventually there will be a price to pay for all the big companies who are pushing ideology, which in turn will inevitably either force them to double down, go even harder, which is typically what happens first, or understand that, okay, we need to change course here because we're losing too much market share. And this is typically when the investors and the shareholders are getting angry. Is like, what the hell is going on with you guys? Look at the numbers. Your sales are crap. What have you been doing?
yeah.
When the money that is behind the company starts to get upset, that's typically when change happens. And they do not care about all the ESG, DEI stuff. They are only doing it because this is the thing to do. And so, I mean, some people do believe it.
Oh yeah.
I'm not saying all of it, but when push comes to shove, they'll choose money first.
There's a third factor. Okay. Remember I mentioned the commission in Denver about the Majestic Bakery?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, Part of what has been a big issue about this is when the government and laws support this, and companies have been very, very careful not to step over these lines and to kowtow to these lines because they could get sued,
Yeah.
right? Um, so they're like, oh, fine, it's cheaper to give money to these programs, right? To bow to this. But when it really does come to the bottom line, where's it going to get to the point of they start fighting? It's like, you know what? It's now financially worth it to fight.
Yeah.
And that one is, I mean, I was watching a vlogger go on, Tim Pool,
Yeah.
about how Budweiser needs to just come out and apologize, right? And that actually might be a really smart move to, to save to save themselves, but, you know, the chance of getting sued by apologizing, right now, that's a bigger stick than taking hits unless the hits continue. So, yeah,
And that's what I think is eventually going to happen. I mean, Disney has been losing market share and so on. CNN, I mean, the it was sold to whatever the previous owner, went away and somebody else bought it, who basically said like, look, we need to get back to straight news, stop with all the partisan crap and this and that. Don Lemon got fired
yes,
yesterday.
and Tucker Carlson.
Yep. So it's not like there's nothing going on the media front. But what I mean is that I mean, again, when advertising dries up, when funding and investments dries up, then companies change. And the only
Yeah,
way to do that is as you, as a customer, you vote with your dollars, and you're like, I'm not buying your stuff. I
yeah,
disagree with you. You are pushing again what we mentioned in the beginning. You take away the common ground. If freaking razors from Gillette have to be controversial with the ads that they do, if a freaking beer, Bud Light of all beers, is controversial, if that becomes political, where's the common ground? There's none. So where do you go to? To the alternatives. Eventually, people get so fed up. It's like, I don't want your bullshit anymore. Leave me the hell alone. I just want to drink my beer. That
yeah.
that was all I wanted. And you guys make it difficult because now people see my beer and they're like, you're drinking that? Drinking that? Are you okay with that? What they said, and so on. So
Now, oh, yes, and there's also something else that is going on here, which a lesson that American car manufacturers, okay, Model T Ford, right, was a car for the middle class buyer. Okay. People could afford it. It was cheap. And then um American auto manufacturers got cocky. Okay. And they began to say, you're going to take what we offer, and if you don't like it, screw you. Well, then Japan and Germany started providing cheap cars. And American manufacturers discovered that when people have choices, the screw you approach doesn't work. Okay. Budweiser, back in the day when it came out, there was really not that. I mean, there was American beer, okay, which still traumatizes me today. Um, and by the way, you did me no favors by introducing me to Belgian beer. Just I blame you. Um, the thing about it is now, though, I mean, Budweiser was always cheap frat beer. Okay. And it was like, well, I'm drinking beer, but I don't want to get fat, so I'll drink light beer. Uh Back then you really had no choice. Nowadays, there are a lot of other beers out there, including some really, fine crafted beers. Although, God, what is wrong with American IPA beers? Yeah. Um, Skanky beer. Um, but there are more choices. Okay. And what Budweiser did is that they pissed off a base that is no longer stuck with them as the choice. I mean, God knows who wanted to drink White Claw, but a lot of younger people do instead of beers. Okay. So, I mean, now that the market isn't trapped, they can go somewhere else.
yeah.
So, do you really want to piss off your market when they have choices to go somewhere else? Come on, you can do it.
Yeah, that's something that I think a lot of companies will eventually have to learn the hard way. But I'm pretty sure that, in many big multinationals, they're looking at the whole Budweiser thing, very carefully to see, like, okay, we do not want that to happen. As indeed as well they should, and maybe, and hopefully that is the impetus for many companies to leave the political and ideological field, and or at the very least scale back a little bit and understand that you are not an elected politician. It's
Yes.
not your job to be doing policy and change society.
Yes.
You are offering a service or a product. You have customers. First thing you do is serve them. And then afterwards, maybe we can talk about, your bigger role in society. But the first thing you have to do is not fucking piss off all the customers
Right.
or push something down their throat.
Like I said, with Disney, pissing people off about like, oh, all we need to do is put up a certain color face and that market will be ours. And it's like, you don't understand those markets,
Yeah.
and it used to be that nobody had a choice except for to buy from Hollywood. Right. I don't know what the Belgian film industry is like, but the thing that I like about Netflix, there's things I don't like, but one of the things I do like about Netflix is that they're showing a lot of foreign films, and because of CGI with the lips,
Yeah.
right? I mean, these are some really good shows coming in. I mean, I'm not going to stoop to Bollywood, but um, you know, they don't control the market anymore.
No. Yeah, it's true. Oh, by the way, if there's a movie, one of the latest movies of Liam Neeson, Memory of a Killer, look up the original. It's a Belgian movie, and it is vastly superior. Not that Neeson is a bad actor, but the story, the script is much better. You do have to know a little bit about the Belgian situation back in the day with different police forces and so on. But it's not that bad. But it's a really, really good movie. Very dark, very dark.
I can live with that.
On
Yeah.
that note, we are going to move over to the Patreon questions because it's getting late over here, and I have to drive my girlfriend to the hospital tomorrow. So to be
Can pause filming for a second.
yeah. But before we go, where can people reach you, Mark?
I can be found at No Nonsense Self Defense, which is my old site.
Yep.
The work with the legal stuff is markmacyoung.com. And then, of course, still Facebook, which I haven't left yet.
Okay, and I'll put all that in the show notes. Okay, good. And Facebook. Good. All right, folks, thanks for listening. Mark and I'm going to keep on going on the Patreon, where I have a bunch of really fun questions for my patrons for him.
Uh-oh.
Everybody, thanks for listening.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
See you later.